Welcome to the next chapter. It is Ecology. Now, ecology is the study of the interrelationships of organisms to each other and to the environment. The environment constitutes the surroundings of an organism, both living and non-living. The living component of the environment is called biotic, while the non-living is called abiotic or physical. Therefore, the environment constitutes all the factors that act on an organism. If the study involves a single species, it is referred to as autecology, while the study of many species is called synecology. Autecology is the study of an individual species within a community. It involves studying the relationships of the species with both the biotic and abiotic components of the ecosystem, its life cycle and adaptation for survival. Synecology is the study of different species of organisms interacting among themselves within an ecosystem. Some of the terminologies used in ecology include the following. Biosphere is the part of the earth and atmosphere inhabited by living organisms. It is also called the ecosphere. A habitat is a specific locality within a particular set of conditions where an organism lives. Habitats are categorized as terrestrial and aquatic. An ecological niche is the position that an organism occupies in a habitat. It includes the physical space where an organism is found and its role in that habitat in terms of feeding relationships and other interactions with other species. Population refers to all members of a given species in a particular habitat at a particular time. For example, the population of a particular species of birds in a lake. A community refers to all organisms belonging to different species that interact in the same habitat. A community, therefore, is made up of populations. A community is not static but undergoes changes progressively, starting from a simple form to a more complex form. An ecosystem is a natural unit composed of both biotic and abiotic factors whose interactions lead to a self-sustaining system, for example a small pond or a large ecosystem such as a tropical forest. Carrying capacity is the maximum number of organisms an area can comfortably support without depletion of the available resources. Factors in an ecosystem. Now, factors in an ecosystem are divided into two groups, abiotic and biotic. Abiotic factors are the non-living environmental factors which affect the distribution of organisms like light, temperature, and others. Light. The sun is the main source of energy for all life on Earth. Green plants and photosynthetic bacteria need light energy to manufacture food. Animals depend on plants for food. Light affects living organisms in terms of intensity, quality, that is wavelength and color, and duration. Light intensity and quality affects the rate of photosynthesis, flowering and germination of plants, while in animals it affects migration, hibernation and reproduction. Temperature. Biochemical processes of most organisms function efficiently within a narrow range of temperature. Temperatures vary due to seasons, altitude, latitude, and also diurnally, especially in hot areas. This therefore affects the distribution of organisms in the habitat. Temperature variations influence the distribution of organisms more in terrestrial habitats than in aquatic ones. High heat capacity of water helps to keep the temperature of the aquatic habitats relatively constant. Living organisms must develop necessary physiological and behavioral adaptations to cope with extremes of temperature. Very low temperatures may inactivate enzymes or kill their protoplasm, while very high temperatures denature the enzymes. Atmospheric pressure. The atmosphere has a definite weight, and so it exerts pressure upon the Earth. On the surface of the Earth, atmospheric pressure varies with altitude. Variation in atmospheric pressure affects the amount of oxygen available for respiration and carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. These two gases affect the distribution of organisms. Decreased atmospheric pressure increases the rate of transpiration and therefore the need to conserve water by plants. Humidity. Humidity refers to the amount of water vapor in the atmosphere. When humidity is high, there is much water vapor in the atmosphere, but when it is low, there is less water vapor. Humidity affects the rate at which water evaporates from the surface of organisms, such as transpiration or sweating. This in turn affects their distribution on Earth. Wind is moving air. It increases the rate of water loss from organisms and therefore affecting their distribution. Wind is also important in rain formation. In desert areas, wind aids in formation of sand dunes. Stable sand dunes may become habitats for growth of desert plants. Wind also causes wave formation in lakes and oceans, which enhances aeration of water in these water bodies. Wind also disperses spores and seeds and influences dispersal and migration of flying animals. Wind also wafts scents and hence determines the position of hunting animals with respect to their prey in a habitat. pH is the measure of how acidic or alkaline water in aquatic habitat or soil solution is. pH influences the distribution of plants and animals in soil and freshwater ponds. Some plants thrive well in acidic conditions, while others thrive in neutral or alkaline conditions. Next is biotic interrelationships. Now, when organisms of different species exist in an ecosystem, they relate in various ways, which include competition, predation, parasitism, symbiosis, and saprophytism. Competition. If two different species require a common resource whose availability is limited, they are said to be in a competition for it. These resources include nutrients, space, light, and mates. Under such conditions, they may exist together in a competition, or one may displace the other. Competition between individuals of the same species is known as intraspecific, while that between individuals of different species is known as interspecific competition. In such competition for a limited resource, organisms with suitable structural and behavioral adaptations survive, while others without such adaptations may die out or migrate. Predation. Predation is the food relationship in which one organism kills another for food and feeds on it, either wholly or in part. The organism which kills another for food is referred to as the predator, while the one killed is the prey. Predators have various adaptive characteristics which make them efficient in capturing the prey. Symbiotic relationship. Symbiosis is an association between organisms in which both of them are benefiting. For example, these birds are in a symbiotic relationship with the herbivore. They obtain food by eating the pests on the animal's body. In so doing, not only do they keep the animal pest free, they also alert the animal in case of an approaching predator. The next aspect of ecology is population. Now, a population is a group of organisms belonging to the same species or habitat. For example, the population of gazelles in a national park. Populations are not static but change in size, structure, and organization. The following are some of the characteristics of populations. Density refers to the number of individuals per unit area, for example, 50 antelopes per square kilometer. Dispersion is the spread or distribution of organisms in a habitat. Population growth refers to the rate of increase in numbers. Population growth rate may be influenced by such factors as food availability, space, disease, pests, and predators. Population estimation methods. In natural populations, the density of organisms in a habitat can be determined by actual body counts. If the area of the habitat is known, the average per unit area can be calculated. It should also be appreciated that animals in a habitat in real situations are not uniformly distributed. In fact, they occur in groups or clusters. As for plants, counting may be easy for large trees like the baobab or for rare trees like meruoc. In field studies, if we wanted to know the kind of plants and animals present in a particular habitat and how many of each species, it is usually impossible to count each and every one present. This problem is usually solved by taking representative samples from within the habitat. A sample is a small number of individuals taken from a habitat that is a representative of the whole population. Samples are used where the area to be studied is too big to enable all organisms living there to be counted. Therefore, only certain areas or positions can be estimated. An important method of estimating population is the capture-recapture method. After selecting the study area, determine its size and choose the organism to be studied. Select an appropriate technique for the organism's capture. Catch the organisms, count, mark and release them back into the habitat. Catch and mark as many organisms under study, recording the first number marked and released as FM. After 24 hours, re-examine the experimental area and collect as many organisms as possible, including those that had been marked. Record the number of organisms collected, second capture SC, and the number of those that had been marked previously, MR. If P is representative of the total population, then P is equal to FM times SC over MR, where FM is the first number marked, SC is the second capture, MR is the marked recaptured, and P is the total population. It is important that the marking technique does not harm the animal or alter its behavior. Marking techniques include light-colored paints that is quick drying, for example cellulose paint or colored nail varnish. For water animals, the paint should be waterproof. Other methods include the use of tags. Now, this method of capture-recapture makes several assumptions: that no organism moves in or out of the area between the two counts. The released animals mix freely with the remaining population. The mark does not alter the animal's behavior. The marked animals will have enough time to mix with the rest, and that the population members does not vary during the study period. This method is suitable for highly mobile animals like insects, birds, small mammals, and fish. Now, an important attribute of all living organisms is their ability to adapt and survive in its living environment. Adaptations of plants to various habitats. Plants possess different adaptations based on their habitats, and hence there are four main groups of plants, namely the xerophytes, mesophytes, hydrophytes, and halophytes. Xerophytes are plants adapted to withstand dry habitats or to endure conditions of prolonged drought, as in the arid and semi-arid areas. These habitats are characterized by the following conditions: unpredictable and poorly distributed rainfall, which usually is less than 250 millimeters but hardly exceeds 350 millimeters per year. Very high day temperatures but very low night temperatures, which results in high diurnal temperature ranges. They are windy and have low humidity. Xerophytes have leaves that are reduced in size, such as the scale-like leaves of the whistling pine, or modified into spines such as the cactus. This reduces the surface area over which transpiration takes place and hence conserves water. Shedding of leaves during drought to reduce surface area exposed to transpiration is a common feature in xerophytes. Their leaves have thick waxy cuticle to minimize the rate of cuticular transpiration. Some leaves are folded to reduce the rate of transpiration by not exposing the stomata to environmental factor. Some of them have sunken stomata which accumulate moisture in substomatal air spaces, leading to low diffusion gradient and thus reducing transpiration rate. Most xerophytes show reduced number of stomata that lowers the rate of transpiration. Some of them experience reverse stomatorhythm, that is, opening of the stomata at night and closing them during the day to prevent excessive loss of water by transpiration. Some plants have deep roots to absorb water from deep in the soil, like the acacia tree, while others have superficial roots which grow horizontally close to the soil surface to absorb water after a short or light shower of rain. Some plants store water in large parenchyma cells contained in succulent stems and leaves, like in cactus, which have a swollen stem. Some xerophytes have a very short life cycle to avoid drought, and some survive as seeds or as underground penetrating organs. So during the short rainy season, their seeds will germinate quickly and flower, producing seeds which are quickly dispersed and then goes into the dormant stage, waiting for another season of rain to germinate. Mesophytes are plants living under normal conditions of water supply or in well-watered soils. They are predominantly found in such ecosystems as savanna, rainforest, and reserve forest. The habitats of mesophytes have the following characteristics. The habitats have adequate rainfall ranging from 950 to 1800 millimeters that is evenly distributed throughout the year. Humidity is relatively high and thick clouds are common. There is moderate to high temperatures with low diurnal range. The habitat are less weedy and have shallow water tables. Depending on where they grow in these habitats, they show various adaptations. Some of these adaptations are for reduction of water loss, while others are for increasing water loss. They are also adapted to light conditions. In a forest ecosystem, the vegetation grows very fast and forms dense vegetation in which there is competition for light among various plants. Trees grow tall due to competition for light. Climbers such as lianas support themselves on the stems of large trees in an attempt to reach sunlight, while epiphytes support themselves on the branches of taller trees. Others that cannot compete for light are adapted to photosynthesis under low light intensities by having numerous chloroplasts. They form the undergrowth. Majority of mesophytes show leaf mosaic that minimize overlapping and overshadowing of leaves so that all leaves are exposed to light for photosynthesis. Mesophytes in areas with ample water supply possess broad leaves with thin cuticle and many stomata on both leaf surfaces to encourage high rate of transpiration. Hydrophytes are plants which normally grow wholly or partially in fresh water. These habitats have low concentration of dissolved gases such as oxygen, and the water medium is of low density. Waves and currents are usually common and light is less abundant under the water. Most emergent and floating types have broad leaves with maximum number of stomata on the upper surface, and this provides a large surface area for gaseous exchange. The exposed stomata allow for quick loss of excess water through transpiration. Some submerged hydrophytes have leaves which are deeply dissected into thread-like straws in order to provide large surface area for absorption of maximum light for photosynthesis. Their leaves have numerous and sensitive chloroplasts that photosynthesize under low light intensities. Hydrophytes have large air-filled tissues called parenchyma. The air in the parenchyma reduces the density, giving buoyancy to the plant and also assists in gaseous exchange. They have poorly developed roots and lack root hairs to reduce absorption of water. Flowers are raised above the water to allow for pollination. Halophytes are plants which are able to tolerate very salty conditions in the soil and marine water. These are habitats characterized by high concentration of mineral salts. They also have low concentration of dissolved gases, especially in marine water. Halophytes are faced with the problem of absorbing water from a medium which has very high salt concentration. The water is thus not easily available to the plant, making the plant experience physiological drought. They overcome this problem in several ways. They have root cells which concentrate a lot of salts in them, and this enables them to take in water by osmosis in the normal way. Some plants have salt glands that secrete excess salt. Also, many of them have water storage tissues. Some plants like the mangrove have pneumatophores or breathing roots which emerge above the water to obtain atmospheric oxygen for respiration. Most of the submerged halophytes are found close to the surface where there is sufficient light energy for photosynthesis. Those in deep waters are capable of photosynthesizing in low light intensities. The reproductive adaptation include floating fruits. The fruits have got large parenchyma tissues for air storage, which makes them buoyant. Next, we look at the energy flow in an ecosystem. The sun is the main source of energy in the universe, and it is this energy from the sun that plants tap. Plants are able to make their own food. They use sunlight, carbon dioxide from air, and water from the soil to make their own food. This process is called photosynthesis. All other animals depend on plants for food. Now see, a giraffe is feeding on the plant. Species that feed on plants are called herbivores. Now again a lion approaches and kills the giraffe, feeding on its flesh. Species that eat other animals are called carnivores. So you see, plants synthesize their own food. Other animals eat plants, and other animals eat these animals that feed on plants. So all are dependent on plants for food. This is called a food chain, and it starts from the plant. In food chains, plants are called producers. The species who eat plants are called primary consumers, and the species who eat those species that are dependent on plants are called secondary consumers. Now there is one more part of this food chain. These are fungi and bacteria in the soil. When animals die, these fungi and bacteria in the soil decompose their bodies, becoming nutrients. These nutrients are again used by plants to make food. So you see here, when the lion dies, its body is decomposed by the microorganisms and it turns into nutrients. And again, these nutrients are used by plants. These fungi and bacteria are called decomposers and are an important part of the food chain. Now let's see another food chain. Here, the rat eats the fruits from the tree and the snake eats the rat. Eagle eats the snake. It dies and it decomposes into nutrients which the plants use to produce fruits. These two food chains are simple ones because they have one producer, one primary consumer, and one secondary consumer. In reality, however, life is not that simple, so we have food webs instead. This is now complex. See the rat. It can be eaten by the cat or the owl or even by a snake. Plants can be eaten by a goat or a rabbit. These complex food chains are called food webs as they are interconnected like spider web. Now we have seen the main source of energy is the sun, and this energy is transferred to bodies of organisms via the food they eat. Plants obtain energy to make food. Primary consumers obtain this energy by feeding on the plants. Secondary consumers obtain the energy by feeding on the primary consumers. So does all the energy from the sun get transferred through the food chain? No. Actually, 90% of the energy is lost as it passes from one part of the food chain to the other. Like 90% of the energy is lost when the giraffe eats the plant. Equally, 90% of energy is lost between the giraffe and the lion. So if I represent this scenario, I obtain a pyramid called the energy pyramid. It shows that the amount of energy becomes lesser and lesser as we move up the food chain from one trophic level to the other. Let's say that the plants absorbed 1000 units of energy from the sun. When transferred to the giraffe, 90% of it is lost, so the giraffe gets 100 units of energy. When the lion eats the giraffe, 90% of the 100 units is lost, so the lion gets 10 units of energy. Next, we'll look at the nitrogen cycle. This is a cycling of nitrogen and its compounds in nature. Nitrogen is essential in the manufacture of proteins, and nitrogen constitutes 78% of the atmospheric gases. It exists as a diatomic molecule. However, living organisms cannot utilize nitrogen in its diatomic form. Before plants can use it to grow, the strong covalent bonds in the nitrogen molecule must be broken. This process is called fixation. The strong bonds can be broken by lightning, and this is a non-biological method of nitrogen fixation. During thunderstorms, the lightning energy combines atmospheric nitrogen with oxygen to form nitrous acid and nitric acid. These are then converted to nitrates. Plants absorb these nitrates from the soil and convert them into plant proteins. However, most fixation happen in the soil, and this is the biological fixation. Certain soil bacteria can break the nitrogen-nitrogen bond and convert atmospheric nitrogen into ammonia. This includes symbiotic bacteria like Rhizobium of the root nodules of legumes. They convert atmospheric nitrogen into ammonia. Then, nitrifying bacteria transform ammonia into nitrates, which can be used by plants. These include the Nitrosomonas and Nitrococcus, which oxidize ammonia into nitrites, and Nitrobacter, which convert nitrites into nitrates. Nitrification enriches the soil, and plants absorb nitrates from the soil to form essential plant proteins. Plants eating animals obtain nitrogen when they feed. Unutilized proteins are released in the animal's excreta. This is decomposed by bacteria and fungi. Ammonia is formed, and this is called denitrification. Examples of these microorganisms include the Pseudomonas and Thiobacillus bacteria and some fungi. Some bacteria even reconvert the nitrogen compounds to inert nitrogen gas. These, together with other nitrogen compounds, outgases from the soil. Excess nitrates and nitrites leach into the ground and into water bodies like lakes, rivers, and to underground water. Now, the next item is pollution. Pollution may be defined as the release of substances or forms of energy into the environment by human activities in such quantities whose effects are either harmful or unpleasant to humans or other living organisms. There are three main categories of pollution, namely air, water, and soil. A pollutant is a substance, mainly waste, that contaminates air, water, or soil. Air pollution. Now, air pollutants include the oxides of sulfur, carbon, and nitrogen, as well as dust and others. Sulfur-based pollutants include the sulfur dioxide and hydrogen sulfide. They are produced by food-preserving industries, manufacture of sulfuric acid, and burning of sulfur-based petroleum fuels. Hydrogen sulfide is produced from mineral extraction mines and also from geothermal power stations. Volcanic activities also release hydrogen sulfide, carbon dioxide, and carbon monoxide into the atmosphere. The oxides of nitrogen include nitrogen 2 oxide and nitrogen 4 oxide. These are produced from burning of petroleum fuels in industries and emissions of exhaust fumes in motor vehicles. They are also released during industrial manufacture of nitric acid. Smoke and fumes contain carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide, and carbon particles as well. These are produced from industries which burn coal and petroleum fuels, and also from motor vehicle exhausts. They are also produced from the burning of natural gases and charcoal. Other pollutants of air include dust, heavy metals like lead and mercury, and also aerosols. Aerosols are substances that consist of very fine particles of liquid or solid suspended in a gas. These include pesticides, insecticides, fungicides, perfumes, air fresheners, and spray paints. Water pollution. Water pollution involves the addition of substances or energy forms into water bodies in quantities that are harmful to the living organisms dependent on that water. There are very many sources of water pollution, which include domestic effluents. Untreated sewage from urban centers get discharged into the rivers used for water supplies for domestic purposes. This sewage contains disease-causing microorganisms such as bacteria, viruses, and protozoa. It is also full of fecal materials and urine, which encourage bacterial growth. Kitchen waste also contains detergents that have a lot of phosphates. Industries discharge various effluents into rivers, dams, marshes, freshwater lakes, seas, and oceans. The effluents contain toxic metallic compounds of mercury, arsenic, and cadmium, in addition to acids and other chemicals. Industries also discharge hot water directly into water bodies, and this may be from cooling processes or from discharging industrial effluents. Some of these effluents may react among themselves, releasing heat into the water. Oil spillages also occur in oceans from oil tanker accidents, offshore oil wells, and refineries, and also from damaged warships. Agricultural chemicals, which include inorganic fertilizers, herbicides, and pesticides, are also common sources of water pollution. Finally, we look at radioactive emissions. Now, nuclear emissions can also cause soil, air, or even water pollution. Although nuclear energy is available in limitless quantity, its harnessing, management, and risk of damage to life are very high. It is based on the destruction of the atom of matter to release energy that holds the constituents of the atom. The form in which this energy is released when the atoms are broken down are generally called radiations. Such radiation has very great power and is very destructive if it leaks accidentally. The industries in which this energy is produced are called radioactive or nuclear reactors. Some of the common substances broken down to release nuclear energy are uranium, radium, germanium, plutonium, and hydrosonium. Nuclear energy is used in the generation of electricity and propelling of nuclear warplanes, nuclear-propelled ocean vessels, spaceships, and submarines. Effects of radioactive emissions include increased mutation rates with increased abnormalities, some of which are inheritable. It also causes cancer such as bone tumors and leukemia. Excess doses of radioactive emissions cause so much damage leading to death.
Without many of these discoveries and inventions, few of us would be alive today. Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 greatest medical breakthroughs in history. Number 6. X-rays. Thanks to the late 19th century studies conducted by German physicist Wilhelm Röntgen on the X-ray, we have tools to look inside the human body. These energy forms have helped us discover and properly diagnose injuries and ailments that could otherwise be missed by external inspection. The X-ray also paved the way for advances in imaging technologies, as well as progress in clinical studies and medical science.